Good afternoon. My name's Joe Bandel, and I am the last Rosicrucian. Today is the 29th of July, and I haven't done a Gaia Ascension update for a while, and I thought, hey, I might just kind of put out a brief message, what my thoughts are, what's been happening, what's going on, because we've really had some massive trigger events, if you will, lately, uh, globally or nationwide, whatever. I mean, I'm just gonna briefly state, okay, former President Trump got shot, grazed, whatever, which was definitely a timeline fork. It was like our world could have been so different the next day than it is today. And a similar thing happening with Biden, where Biden is essentially forced out of the running for the presidential election by his own party. And I'm not care. It doesn't matter what the purpose is. Not, well, who you're going to vote for on these kind of things. The purpose that I'm getting at is that uh, these are far-reaching events, and the stress level just keeps getting jacked up, just keeps getting jacked up. I look at some things in my own personal life, and I'm thinking, well, what the heck? I'll give an example. I'm retired. I have been so on the computer trying to. I've been pulled into these events that I haven't been getting any translating done or anything like that, and I need to kind of snap out of it. I recognize that. But one of the things that is kind of bizarre is that where I live, it's an apartment building, and there's people here that don't like dogs, I guess is what it is. You could just say they have it out for certain people. I wouldn't say they have it out for me in particular, but I know there's one lady that has a dog that Valentine likes to play with when she can. And this is how do I want to just kind of say, okay, so I live in town. About 100 yards from me is the Mississippi River, and there's a park right there, just a small park. It's a new park, very nice little place. And then right across the street is a high school property that has a football field, and it has about half of the area there is just open mowed grass. Sometimes people might play soccer there, or they might even have like a little golf type thing set up, something like that. There's some trees. In other words, you can kind of take the dog across the street, and you can kind of walk in there as a nice thing. Or you can walk along the river, the Mississippi River, and you can go about a it's about a half mile, maybe more than a half mile, and there's another park, and then there's a nice kind of walk through the woods that's about a half mile walk through the woods, with a dog park at the end of that, and you can kind of loop around. So there's a lot of nice places to take Valentine. And every 2 hours, every 3 hours, I try to get up off my butt and take her out someplace. Well, what happens is every now and then there's some of these places that, okay, they're out of the way, there's nobody there, it's not hurting anybody, and you just kind of let the dogs off the leash and you let them play together. And that is flipping, driving some old ladies that live where I live totally crazy. And they must have nothing better in their life than to be looking out their windows with the binoculars to see either me or somebody else that kind of likes to, okay, we're in this secluded area where there's nobody, and we kind of slip off the leash and let the dogs kind of have a little bit more freedom, even though they're not doing anything. Well, so they're getting reported. Whether, I don't think it's me in particular, but it could be. I could be getting reported, but this one lady for sure is getting reported. But then there's some other dogs, and there's not an abuse of any of this kind of thing. But what happens is these certain ladies, these old ladies that live in the apartment where I live, are just poisonous, angry about the dogs. And it's not in the building where I live, and it's not on the property where I live. It's when you take the dog off, and they cannot stand to see this. So what they're doing is they're calling the cops, and the cops are calling the animal control, and the animal control comes up and shows up, and there's nobody. By that time the dogs are all back on their leashes or something like that, and it just kind of has been cooking, it's been boiling, it's been simmering for probably a year, a good year or something like that. And it's just kind of crazy how the hatred, and I'm realizing that probably some of the people that are listening to me, they're going like, okay, there's a leash law. You shouldn't let your dog off the leash. Yeah, okay, yeah, and I admit that, but part of me is kind of like, that's kind of petty. Okay, so that's just me. That's kind of the attitude on things like that. But it's an escalation, because apparently there's calls going in, and it's, how many people with dogs are we talking about? There are probably maybe six people with dogs that could, on occasion, once in a while when there's nobody around, kind of have their dogs walk beside them or is not on a leash or something like that in some of these areas. And the opposition to that is just rabid, and all the calls, all the complaints that are calling into the police are coming from my building, apparently, is what I've heard. I'm getting all this secondhand because I personally am protected enough psychically or magically or whatever that nothing's happening to me. But I got a call this morning over in the high school lot area there, where we usually just kind of let the dogs loose in the grass for a little bit out there. I mean, there's like about a 4 acres of just mowed grass, uh, with a couple baseball fields and football fields and uh, just not in other areas where there's just nothing. It's just mowed grass, and it's down in a low spot with hills going up all the way around. So I mean, it's not like where you could run off to any place. But anyway, these apparently they're just getting calls and calls and calls and calls, and it's got to be from like three people making these calls, and whatever kind of bitterness, whatever kind of hatred that these people must have in their hearts, I really feel sorry for them. And this morning, one of the supervisor, if you will, that's over at the high school, they kind of, I was talking to him, and he was saying, you know, I'm kind of sorry, but we can't really have your dogs running off the leash, because we've been getting complaints from the animal control because people are calling it in. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. Is it okay to still walk around and take my dog there as long as she's on a leash? And he says, yeah, I've got no problem with that. So for me personally, you just make that little bit of adjustment. It's no biggie. But I'm trying to use this as an illustration, because that cancer, that anger, that hatred that would cause a person who's not even in the immediate vicinity to call in to the police for something they see across the road, and do it over and over and over and over again, it's eating them up. It's got to be eating them up. And I think that rancor, that bitterness, that hatred, that anger, that's symptomatic of what's happening in our world. And it's growing. And not only growing, but it's getting more divided more quickly. It's reaching a crescendo. Crescendo is what I'm thinking is happening, because when I do the Gaia Ascension update, I try to talk about what I think is happening in the world, what I feel with the energies that's going on with the energies, and also what's changing in my life or whatever. And when I look back over the last 2 months, what's the big change in my own life? Well, the big change in my own life, ascension-wise, whatever, is I've really switched from doing my morning meditation, oak meditation, meditation that's drawing in the light, bringing in the light, and just trying to be filled with light and peace and love and all this kind of stuff, which I've been doing that for probably 3 years. Every morning, that's part of my morning program. And I'm very careful that I do that because it's become almost like I can't go through my day without having kind of reset myself, put myself in a good space. Well, what's happened in the last 2 months is I'm doing one of those at night too. So if you talk about anchoring in the light, bringing in the light, tapping into the light, tapping into the high vibrations or whatever, and trying to anchor that to earth, I've doubled what I do. And doubling what you do, that, and because my meditations are very powerful. And so it's become part of my life now. I do one in the morning and one in the evening. It's a doubling. And that means that, at least for me, that if there's any influence or impact that I have on Gaia's Ascension or where I live or anything like that, it's being doubled. And if it's being doubled, well, what's that doing to the resistance? What's that doing to these old ladies that are just having their hearts filled with hatred and bitterness? Especially because they can't seem to get the result. They can't get the satisfaction of whatever it is that they're trying to get done. Whatever they're doing is not working that way. And I could say the same thing when I look at the community or our world, the United States, whatever. It's the same thing. You have these people, they're just so filled with hatred and bitterness, and they're trying and trying and trying, and they're trying to ruin it for some people who don't have. They're not angry. I'm not angry at anybody. I'm not trying. I just want to be left alone. That kind of thing. I'm not trying to change anybody that way, and I'm not trying to hurt anybody. But I'm not giving in. I'm not compliant, I guess. And this is probably the rub, is that these other people, that what's driving these people crazy is the people who don't kneel down. They don't comply to the external authority. And I never will, because I believe in internal authority. I believe in following the voice of my inner guide, my conscience. I was raised that way. But that's... Anyway, so there you go. This is just a thought that I came out with, that you want to know what's happening with Gaia's Ascension is the stakes apparently just got doubled down. There's a doubling down. One side versus the other side or whatever is just, and the split is getting more deeper and more violent, more anger. It doesn't matter if you're talking about global issues or national issues or local issues or some old lady that lives in the same building that I do. I mean, you're gonna find it that way. And what's the answer? I guess the answer is you let things play out. What else can you do? Anyway, I don't even know if anybody was going to find this of interest. I'm not venting particularly, but I am kind of ruminating. I'm kind of saying, I see this happening. This seems to be happening, and not only because my life is pretty protected. My life's pretty mellow. When something actually forces its way in to where I have to alter my behavior or change something, it's got to be worth considering. So anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful day and hold true to who you are. And try to achieve your dream. Don't get drawn into somebody else's game. Don't get drawn into somebody else's storm, because there's a lot of storms that are going on right now. Thank you. Till next week.